Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I stand here to make my contributions to the budget debate for 2023. But, Mr. Speaker, before I proceed to do that, I would wish to add my voice to what was said 2 days ago by the Honorable Member Priya Manik Chand, when she reminded this House that our behavior here sometimes leaves much to be desired. I would also want to say to us, and I'm sorry the member is not here, to remind us that every day young people are watching and they're listening to us. And so we shouldn't come here at convenient times to behave like Mother Teresa and Holy Marys, to come to talk about young people watching us and young people listening to us, when we ourselves are guilty of some of the foolishness. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to us that we are here to do the people's business, and we should be serious about that. The honorable member who spoke 2 days ago spoke about all the things, but that same member forgot that she stood right in this very House and called a member stupidity. We have to be careful. And so for us to begin change must first start with me. Mr. Speaker, as I begin my contribution here this morning, I want to say to us, Mr. Speaker, as I rise to make my contributions to this budget presentation, which came from the Minister with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashley Singh, on Monday, January 16th. Sir, I wish to immediately move to say to us that this budget of $781.9 billion is a budget for friends, families, and favorites. This is the fourth budget of this installed regime, and it doesn't really do any good to the small man. Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that while we were having the big announcement about this budget, I had some encounters with a couple of persons. And you know, persons said to me, this budget, when you ask about budget being read, which budget? They're not aware of it. They're not interested. Some said to me, this budget ain't got nothing to do with me. This budget is not for us. We will not benefit in any way from this budget. And so, Mr. Speaker, I find this very, very disheartening when you hear people talk about the budget in this manner. Mr. Speaker, I could remember when the APNU AFC government and the Honorable Minister Winston Jordan was reading his budgets, persons were tuned in to their radios. Taxi driver turned off their music and they listened. The vendors and lots of people gallied around Parliament building because they wanted to know what was happening. Mr. Speaker, those budgets presented the good life for the people of Guyana. And we can say to you, Mr. Speaker, that the Guyanese people, the Guyanese man, woman, they were real men and women because they knew that there was something there for them. Mr. Speaker, last Monday, Guyanese went about their business because they knew that the daily struggle will continue and it will become even harder. And because of that fact, they weren't interested. Mr. Speaker, I must say to us that when we come here to present budgets, our budgets passed with the interest of the Guyanese people. Our people here must be able to live a life that is comfortable. Our people here must not be saying to us that the budget is filled with illegal transactions for friends, families, and favorites. Mr. Speaker, the people on the government side, I can tell you, They don't know anything about struggle. And it's no longer a guessing game for the people out there. The people know it well. The people know about the propaganda that they're going to spread across this land. And so people are not bothered when they hear about the biggest budget. Mr. Speaker, at a glance, this budget would quickly reveal the trick. The money has been put into infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, and we know when it goes there, that's where the big, bingy, illegal party is at, where the friends and the families and all of them will enjoy it. Mr. Speaker, we have recognized that coming out of these budgets, you would see friends and families and favorites forming shell companies, and they bid for contracts, and the monies are directed to their pockets and the kickbacks to other places. Mr. Speaker, this budget is all about the PPPC and their friends, and I want you to know, you're not fooling anybody, you're fooling yourselves. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to the people out there who are listening to us, to the young people especially who are listening to us, that...
Mr. Speaker, sorry to interrupt my honorable friend. I rise on a point of order, Order 16, in relation to imputing improper motive. What the honorable member said was that contracts are given to friends and family and directed to their pockets.
So I will uphold that point of order because I was waiting to see where it comes, and it came in with fooling. Fooling was the other word used about the government, your side. Fooling, not fooling anyone. Honorable member, you're now an experienced person in the House, and I'm sure you have better ways of delivering your opinion rather than imputing motive.
I'm so
we will
guided,
strike that
Mr.
from the
I'm so guided. Mr. Speaker, I must let you know that Dr. Ashmi Singh has yet again fallen short and has failed to satisfy something I suspect might be the story of his life. Sir, we cannot ignore the context and the circumstance in which this budget is being presented. The context in which this debate is occurring should not be pleasing to anyone. As this nation, Mr. Speaker, grapples under the vindictive, evil, and uncaring governance of the government in office, no facet of Guyana, of life in Guyana, is safe. Mr. Speaker, the carnage is everywhere. Sir, I take no pleasure in reporting to this chamber that the people, and to the people of Guyana, that our education system is in crisis. It has fallen to the carnival of lawlessness. We have barely passed the first pandemic, and now, Mr. Speaker, we're struggling with another pandemic. Every day, children's bag, when they are being checked in schools, you're finding weapons of all sorts. Mr. Speaker, children are sitting in classrooms hungry because they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Fights in and out of schools. Teachers, parents, students against students. Mr. Speaker, teachers are reporting for duty under stress every day. Mr. Speaker, they can't afford to pay their rent, it's too high. Teachers are left to struggle through the month with their low salaries as they watch other workers get increases. Mr. Speaker, the disrespect that has been meted out to teachers has added another layer of frustration to their plight. And I must remind this House, Mr. Speaker, that it is a very minister, the Honorable Manik Chand, who told the teachers in New Amsterdam a few years ago, when they complained about low salaries and increases, she said to them, if you don't like the job, if you don't like the monies you're getting, leave the job. Mr. Speaker, that's very caring. That's very concerned. Mr. Speaker, when we come here to talk about inclusivity, we need to turn on the other side. to make sure that we are saying the right things. Mr. Speaker, the teachers in the education system can't look to the Ministry of Education for any help because the ministry has become too politicized and they're only interested in taking care of their friends, their cronies, and their favorites. Professionals, Mr. Speaker, are being sidelined and the full Peter principle is in effect. Mr. Speaker, the most incompetent are rising to the top, and it's a fact. Mr. Speaker, this $94.4 billion that would have been allocated to education cannot solve the confusion that we're having. What we need to have, Mr. Speaker, is a clear plan that deals with inclusivity, fairness, transparency, and real love to the Guyanese people and their children directly. Mr. Speaker, this installed regime, they have not only disrespected our teachers, but their lawlessness exposed our teachers to daily dangers. Mr. Speaker, let me bring your attention to the fact of the issue we had at Queen's College not too long ago. But we come here to play Jesus and Mary's when the parent from a student at the Queen's College University, at the Queen's College school there, abused the deputy principal, abused the principal, and there was silence coming from my friends over there. And you know what is most disgusting? It's the fact that the parent was a male parent, and the deputy principal and the principal, they are females, and we heard not a sound from over there. And so it is convenient sometimes, Mr. Speaker, when we want to talk about inclusivity and caring and all of these things, but when things happen and our friends are the perpetrators, we say nothing about it. Mr. Chairman, where are we? Where are our voices when these things are happening? Mr. Speaker, in this, it is sad that this budget is being debated at this time when we experience all these problems that we're having. Mr. Speaker, when it's not the burning of the schools, it's the fighting in the schools. And Mr. Speaker, at this time, I want to publicly stand here to say we condemn the burning of schools. But you know what is more disgusting, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that these fires, these schools are being burnt every time the PPPC are sitting in government. We get fires. Mr. Speaker, it moves one to ask the question, therefore, why are we setting these fires? Why are these fires happening under the PPPC? But one would know, Mr. Speaker, that many of the lands that our schools are sitting on, they are prime lands, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to us, and I want to plead with this uncaring government, to put measures in place to stop the fires, stop our schools from being burnt. Do something to convince us that you care and that you're concerned. Because you know what? School is not a place for only education. School is also an economic zone for small vendors who operate little canteens and little stalls there. School is a place, Mr. Speaker, where there's a social network that provides for that little community. Mr. Speaker, what is even worse here is that all we hear about is an investigation is ongoing, and an investigation is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, the carnage is everywhere, and it continues. Mr. Speaker, the gangsters here don't care less as they continue to roll in their carnival of illegal transactions. Mr. Speaker, don't let me talk about the healthcare system, because we have many mothers who are crying for their daughters when we talk about maternal deaths. We have many children who are crying for their mothers. We have many husbands who are crying for their wives. And you know what we hear? An investigation is ongoing. An investigation is ongoing. And these investigations, the ongoing investigations, are never completed. Mr. Speaker, it pains my heart when you listen sometimes to children who have lost their mothers, who went into the hospitals to give birth, and then the mothers, in some cases, the mothers are dead and the baby is alive. In other cases, the babies are dead, the mother is alive, and in some cases, both are dead. And what do we see? An investigation is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, our citizens are refusing to visit the public hospitals. Their families and friends have decided that they're going to make sacrifices to spend their monies at private services. And yet we boast of a budget that talks about 700 and whatever billion dollars. Mr. Speaker, the dark days have returned. The dark days of ghosts, phantoms, and the hired guns have returned. Guyanese are asking the question, Mr. Speaker, why are these things happening every time the PPP government is in office? Mr. Speaker, the Stavros News has declared that extrajudicial killings have become a feature of the society. In November, the newspaper pointed out, Mr. Speaker, the environment in Guyana is one where state and non-state actors feel empowered to take the lives of others, comfortable in knowing that they will bear no repercussions. Mr. Speaker, extrajudicial killings have simply become another feature of our society. Mr. Speaker, the tears of mothers are being shed from Berbice to Essequibo. In Demerara, in Berbice, Mr. Speaker, the Henry's family, they're still crying. In Berbice, Mr. Speaker, Harish Singh's family, they are still crying. In Essequibo, the Bostons are crying. Mr. Speaker, in Demerara, the Headley's family, they are sobbing. Mr. Speaker, in not too far from where we are right here at Nabakalis, the Quindon Bacchus family, they can't sleep comfortably at night. Mr. Speaker, the members on that side of the House, I want you to know that the tears of these people are on you. The tears of these people are on you. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to all of us, I want to say especially to my friends over there, the consideration of this budget, I cannot in conscience lend any support to it. It is woefully short on delivery to end the carnage and to satisfy anyone. Mr. Speaker, I take no pleasure in supporting this budget because, Mr. Speaker, Labor is in a state of disrepair, and it is the worst that we would have ever had in decades. Mr. Speaker, workers have become sacrificial lambs in an environment where the labor laws are not being enforced. Mr. Speaker, workers can't have access to labor laws, to assistance from the labor officers, because we have a labor minister who doesn't even understand what labor is, and so he cannot labor for the workers whom he seeks to represent. Mr. Speaker, our folks are suffering, our people are suffering. Every day persons are being laid off and you can't get any redress. Mr. Speaker, this budget, I must say, is anti-working class. And we therefore don't expect to see any improvement in the fiscal year that will encompass the budget. Mr. Speaker, the fundamental flaw in this budget, as it relates to labor, lies in the government's failure to understand what will be the ultimate liberation of the working class. And this liberation, Mr. Speaker, does not lie with handouts and an increase of $3,000 and $4,000 in their salaries. You have to make the real man and the woman, you have to make the small man and the small woman a real man. The only way that can be done, I must assure you, is that we must achieve, it must be done through equity. The government does not This government refused to understand that concept. Mr. Speaker, I must say to you that this budget has no poverty alleviation program for the working class. There is no affirmative action that addresses the economic disparities of workers due to historical discrimination.
Honorable member, I'll give you back your time, but I'm hearing thieving and thief. These are unparliamentary words. We can keep that for outside of the house. I'm hearing in the house. An honorable member Patterson, if you have a problem with my hearing, maybe you can recommend a good hearing aid doctor. Honorable member, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, therefore, in this regard, just like the honorable member who presented the document, I must say it falls short and fails to satisfy, again, a story of his life. Mr. Speaker, I have thoroughly examined this budget, and nowhere in this document is the word equity mentioned in any significant way. Added to the absence of this word, Mr. Speaker, there is no mention of the collective bargaining process. Workers' wages must not be subjected to the whims and fantasies of the government that decides what freck they wish to dish out here and wish to dish out there. The installed government that functions for their friends and families, Mr. Speaker, could only care less about the poor people. Mr. Speaker, the record will show that in 2016, the APNU AFC government restored collective bargaining in this country. And sir, I feel duty bound to remind this government that this process stems from the International Labour Convention number 151 that we have signed on to, but conveniently we don't use that. Mr. Speaker, the convention provides for the protection of public sector citizens, the right to organize and to collective bargaining, the process of disrepute of settlement through negotiations, conciliation, mediation, and arbitration. Mr. Chairman, we must say to us that this budget ought to represent the people of this country. And sir, the Minister of Labour, insofar as he has a voice, should be reminding his cabinet colleagues that about Guyana's international treaty obligations of international labour conventions, which are baked into legislation, such as the Trade Union Recognition Act, Chapter 8907. Which imposes an obligation on the union and the employer to bargain in good faith and enter negotiations with each other for the purpose of collective bargaining. However, Mr. Speaker, we understand that this goodly gentleman seems to be lost in a masquerade of his own. Mr. Speaker, there is no grand announcement by the Minister of Finance that the government plans to restore this process. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the little frecks that have been identified by this budget fail to address the macro issues that are affecting the working class. Therefore, Budget 2023 has fallen short again and cannot by any stretch of one's imagination provide any satisfaction. Mr. Speaker, this tone-deaf and vindictive government does not seem to get it right. They are rejoicing over the fact that they seemingly have made salary adjustments here and they have reduced the income tax threshold. They've increased old age pension and generally through a few measures here and there. Sir, I understand that it is difficult to explain the economic hardship of people who are receiving $1 million a month. They don't understand how it feels to cry when you don't have anything to eat. But my message today is not intended for the members who are sitting on this side of the house. who could live well and don't care about anybody else. My message here today is to explain to the Guyanese people, our young people who are listening, that despite the measures that have been placed there, it will not do anything good to change the difficulties that they are faced with. And wish to point out to them that it will not change as long as the People's Progressive Power is in power. Mr. Speaker, the IDB pegged Guyana's inflation rate at 6.6% in 2023. This means that any increases in salaries would have been zero because the inflation would have already taken that up. And so you cannot rejoice because you have no increase. What is $85,000, Mr. Speaker? When you're finished dealing with your rent of $50,000, what is left? $35,000. How do you go about living your daily life with that kind of money? Mr. Speaker, you are left with nothing much because it's no longer a light bill, but it's a heavy bill. And then you have the water bill, and then you have all the other bills to pay, which this government, Mr. Speaker, any government in their right mind would not rejoice at that effort of seeing workers receive $85,000 a month. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, there is absolutely no reason to celebrate. Mr. Speaker, the Guyanese people have seen the vindictiveness and uncaring regime in operation. There is no hope in change. Things will not get better. The oil money will never reach the pockets of the small man under this regime. There is only one hope, Mr. Speaker, and that hope is the hope that the APNU AFC stands ready to rescue this situation and to see the people of Guyana live a different life. Mr. Speaker, I want to say to this House, and I want to agree with my friends on that side, when they would have said they've done so many things. And yes, Mr. Speaker, they have done quite a lot, and they have a track record. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that the PPP has a record of doing things for the people of Guyana. They would have resulted in huge changes in their lives, in their community. And yes, Mr. Speaker, this is their track record. Burning buildings, they've done something. Increased poverty, solved mysteries, they've done something.
But honorable member, again, you're imputing that they are burning buildings. That one to withdraw.
I beg to withdraw, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so guided by you. Mr. Speaker, rampant discrimination, something happened. Mr. Speaker, the largest cocaine haul and the narco trade that would have been returned. Mr. Speaker, blatant illegal transactions, providing for their families and favorites, those are what we get as their track record. Mr. Speaker, where could the average man receive a good life? It cannot happen under this government. In service of that interest, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Winston Jordan, as Finance Minister, presented to the House in 2015 a budget titled A Fresh Approach to the Good Life in the Green Economy. Mr. Speaker, when the Guyanese people listened, they were stimulated, growth occurred, their growth was restored, and the good life was returned. Mr. Speaker, in the next year, we had another budget presented, and it said to us, the journey of the good life continues for the fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, we cannot transform the economy and empower people under this regime. What we see under this regime, Mr. Speaker, is blatant, daring, illegal activities, more and more cocaine fines, more and more criminal activities, and Mr. Speaker, the list can go on and on and on. Mr. Speaker, I hereby call to the attention the words of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, where he says, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. One can spin that narrative, Mr. Speaker, as much as you wish, but the fact remains that this budget, again, has fallen short and fails to satisfy all Guyanese. I must say, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen here is a full play on the cultural center stage, which dramatizes the life of the honorable gentleman who would have presented same. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I wish to say that I cannot support this fallen budget, which is short of satisfying the people of this country.